Hello and welcome to the HR Kyle podcast, the ultimate resource for HR insights and guidance that will empower both seasoned business professionals and eager job seekers. I'm HR Kyle, your host. I'm excited to embark on this journey with you. In each episode, we'll delve into the intricacies of HR management, uncovering strategies that can transform the way you approach talent acquisition, employee engagement, and workplace dynamics. Whether you're a seasoned HR pro navigating the ever-evolving landscape of human resources or a job seeker striving to land your dream position, this podcast is your compass. Our mission is simple: to provide you with actionable knowledge, expert interviews, and inspiring stories that will help you thrive in the world of HR. So, sit back, relax, and get ready to take your HR game to the next level. Welcome to the HR Kyle podcast, where HR meets success. Welcome to this edition of the HR Kyle podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about the art of effective communication. Yes, you heard me right. That's segment one. In our second segment, we'll have a special guest. Her name is Kelly, who's been a dedicated employee at a company for quite some time. She has an insightful story to tell. So stay tuned for valuable insights and engaging discussions. We'll be right back after this brief break from our sponsor. Are you a business owner looking to build a thriving team? Or perhaps a job seeker on a quest for your dream career? Look no further than HR Kyle. HR Kyle is your trusted partner for all things human resources. We're not just about services, we're about success. For businesses, HR Kyle offers tailored HR solutions from talent acquisition to compliance support. We're here to help your team flourish. And for the job seekers, HR Kyle provides personalized career guidance and direction that only a seasoned HR professional can offer. We'll help you find that perfect job match. Don't settle for less. Choose HR Kyle and unlock success today. Visit us at www.hrkyle.com. HR Kyle, unlocking potential, empowering careers, transforming business. Welcome back to this episode of the HR Kyle podcast. In this first segment today, we're delving deep into the vital skill of effective communication. Now, whether you're in HR, management, or any professional role, mastering this art is essential. We'll explore strategies, tips, and real-world examples to help you become a more adept communicator. So let's get started on our journey to better, more effective interactions. Before I get started into the information, I always like to give a reason why. So why are we having this discussion today, besides the obvious reasons? So a couple of data points for you to think about. In recent surveys, 80% of employees said that having effective communication, receiving effective communication from their leaders built better trust. So that's 80% attributed better communication, effective communication, to trust from their leadership. Number 2 point, 97%, 97% of employees believe it makes them more effective at their job. And you think, of course, better communication, I'm better at my job. Imagine that. So that's the why. But let me hit you with a couple more. Here's the cost of ineffective communication. So we've talked about the benefit. We've got to talk about the cost if we're ineffective at it, right? Missed deadlines. 28% of employees say they missed deadlines because the communication about that project, that deliverable, whatever it was ineffective. Project not completed. So the project's not even done. 44% of employees said ineffective communication led to them not completing a project as they needed to. Here's one. I don't think it's going to be a surprise to anyone. In fact, I'm surprised the score is low as it is. 31% of employees said ineffective communication contributed to low morale. 31%. I'm skeptical of that. I would have to believe it's probably higher. Lost sales. Hey, we're in business to make money, right? 18% of employees said they lost sales. Sales were lost for their organization due to ineffective communication. So what does that translate to? We got some dollars around that as well from some of the data that we've looked at. For a 100 employee company, keeping in mind that most companies are smaller, they're that size. The other thing I have to share is most of our listeners, the largest percentage come from companies that are smaller size like this. Companies of that size lose on average $420,000 per year due to ineffective communication. And again, it's those missed deadlines, it's those projects not completed, the morale being low, the lost sales, all of those things. $420,000. So imagine your company and being able to hit that bottom line with an additional $420,000. That's why we're having this conversation today. There's a lot of benefits to effective communication, not the least of which the revenue impact. So I call this one being an effective communicator. And I always like to say, so of all the titles, why that one? So let me break it down for you. Being says we're making a conscious effort because we have to. Yes, as humans, we're communicative beings, but you know what? We've got to make an effort to be good at it, to be effective at it. So there's a conscious effort. Effective means you're shooting for a desired result. So communication just isn't about delivery. It's about attaining a result that you desire, right? So effective. And a communicator, what's that say? That says we're imparting or exchanging information, right? Because why else would you communicate? We're not communicating for the sake of communication. There's a goal in mind here. You must have all three of those for communication really to work, to be effective, right? So here's some keys, and this is where we're going to start when we talk about effective communication. We're going to answer these questions. We're going to answer who, what, when, where, and why. So let's go through those, okay? Who? First off, who needs to know? And if you're working in an organization, you're asking yourself, here's this information. Who needs to be made aware of the information that I have? Okay, so you're answering the question who. What? So what do they need to know, right? This comes back to your goal of communicating. So what do I need them to know? You've identified your who, you're determining what you need them to know, and then it's when. When do they need to know it? That comes back to the type of information that you're delivering. If it's a meeting notice, gosh, you want to give them some notice, right? Nobody likes the pop meeting coming up, 5 minutes before it's set to start and you find out there's a meeting. So you want to give those individuals time. So you're answering that question when. When do they need to know it? What else goes into that when besides just having that lead time? How much time is it going to take that person to prepare? Do they have other meetings? Are they in the office that day? What's the rest of their schedule look like, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot goes into that when, but that's another piece we have to think about. And then where. The where speaks to where should I let them know? So it's talking about the source of delivery. Does it need to be sent by email? Does it need to be sent by telephone? Does it need to be sent by a meeting notice, an invite? Zoom invitation, some other online or virtual tools, going through that mechanism. Can it be shared word of mouth? So you're looking at what's the most effective, because again, we're talking about effective here. What's the most effective source of delivery, whatever that is, and you're thinking through that to determine it. And then I mentioned the why. The why is also helpful. Why? Why is the why helpful? It informs who, what, when, and where. Because you're asking yourself, why? So why does Jane need to know about this meeting? Why, what do they need to know? Well, why do they need to know it? We'll answer that question of what. When, there's a lot of whys there also, because you need to give the person advance notice and so on and so forth. The where, in other words, the source of delivery, again, you're determining why it needs to be known. If it's an immediate thing, maybe, verbally, that's when you need to let them know. If it's a meeting that's a week from now, yes, maybe sending it by email will work. If it's something you need to be sure that they read and it's going to happen pretty soon, text is probably your best mechanism. We know that 90+% of texts are read. In fact, only about 70%, maybe a little less, of emails that are sent are actually read. But texts are very effective at delivering a message. So again, you're answering that question why as it relates to those other questions: who, what, when, and where. Doesn't have to be in this order as you're going through this analysis. You start with where you struggle. If you struggle with giving enough information, so that's where you're going to start when you're scheduling this meeting or this conveying this information. Or if you struggle with including all the interested parties, maybe that's where you start with. You start with the who and you answer that question. But again, it's who, what, when, where, and the why for all of those. Those are where you start with effective communication. So let's break this down even a little bit further because I always like to get into the data a little bit with this kind of discussion. So here's what we know about in-person communication. And again, there's stats to prove this. I'm happy to give you sources if you reach out to me as far as where I got this data, but let's talk through it a little bit. 55% of communication that we have with others focuses on nonverbals. Yep, you heard me right. It's not the verbal. It's not what you're saying. It's the nonverbals. It's how the message is conveyed. If your head's up, if you're looking the other way, if you're faced away from another person, the way you tilt your head, the hand movements, all those other things, all those nonverbals, those things that we think about when we talk about nonverbals. 55% of communication is in that area. So that leaves us another 45%, right? 38% is the vocal side of it. So it's the tone, it's the inflection, it's all of those things. So again, we haven't even gotten to what you're sharing. We're talking about nonverbals first, 55%, the vocal components of the communication, so the tone and inflection. 7% of communication, in-person communication, focuses on the words actually, so the actual content of what you're sharing. So that's the smallest part. It's more about the nonverbals, the tone, the inflection, all those other things. And if you think about it, it's the difference between someone saying, you did a terrible job, or you did a terrible job, or yeah, you did a terrible job. Saying it in those three different ways conveys that message just a little bit differently, right? Because part of what you're reading is how does the person feel about what it is they're sharing? And many times as humans, we have a reaction to how that person seems like they're relating it to us or how they seem like they feel. So again, 55% nonverbal, 38% the vocal, so the tone and inflection, and only 7% really works with the words. What do we take from that? Nonverbal communication heavily influences how people receive, interpret, and react to the information we're sharing. So think about that as a leader, okay? Let's break this down a little bit further and again, put this into practice, I guess you could say more about what we're talking about here with these figures. So you as leader in these face-to-face conversations, think about the kind of messages that you're sharing in face-to-face, right? Typically lengthy conversations, you're delivering complex or sensitive messages. Maybe it's a brainstorming session. There's a dialogue amongst a group, so think about that, where these factors come into play. Building consensus, right? You've got a group of people, you're trying to determine what the best answer, the best response, whatever it is, so you're building that consensus. You're conducting training. How about that? You know, how you're delivering that training message, much like I'm doing right now. And then corrective feedback. Again, as leaders, we're providing corrective feedback from time to time. Think about the nonverbals and the vocal side of that message you're delivering, because that's going to determine whether that's corrective feedback or it's just simply feedback that's entering into the air. Okay? That's the difference between being effective with it or not. So here's what we know. Again, if I'm repeating myself, I apologize, but we really want to hammer this point home about effective communication. Your delivery is really more important than the words you choose. And isn't that so true if you think about some of the messages that maybe you've received in your life at a different point? How that person delivered it many times is what you took with you and you still remember to this point in time, no matter how long ago, whatever that communication was and whatever took place there, you're remembering how that person delivered it, right? That's what we're talking about. So, message recipient. In effective communication, you cannot forget the message recipient, right? Because that's the person you're delivering this communication to, and they're a factor in this being effective or ineffective. Okay. Well, for one, as the recipient, listen for understanding, not to respond. And again, we've heard this many times. I don't think I'm laying any groundbreaking information here to you, but I'm trying to make some points to stick with you. And this is one of the biggest ones. As a message recipient, listen for understanding. There'll be time to respond. Don't listen to respond. Face the speaker and maintain eye contact, right? Because we just read nonverbals and the tone and the inflection are the biggest parts that we take from communication. Well, the biggest way you're going to gather that information is by facing that speaker, maintaining eye contact so you can see how that message is being delivered, literally. Okay. Be attentive. Okay. Here's what I'm talking about here. Be present. Yeah, physically, of course, but mentally and emotionally. How often are we involved in a communication and our mind's wandering because we have something else on our mind, something else that's coming up? This person just interrupted us. You're not mentally present in those situations. Emotionally present. Okay, what's that mean? The first words that they share send you into a place to where you're already feeling emotion about the words that they've shared. Guess what's not happening at that point? You're not continuing to gather enough information about what they're sharing. Okay, you're not listening for understanding at that point. Emotion is kicked in, understanding takes a backseat to that. So again, be attentive mentally, physically, emotionally. Keep an open mind. Information is being delivered to you. Be open-minded about it. Don't already be formulating your thoughts, ideas, feedback, whatever it is about the information that's being shared. Okay? Don't be judgmental and certainly don't interrupt. Because what we find sometimes about communication delivery is the person's just not an effective communicator. So it takes them a while to get their whole message through. And maybe they're 3 and 4 sentences in before you really understand what it is they're sharing or what they're saying. But if you've already had a reaction to the first couple of sentences and you're already not mentally or emotionally there and you're looking for your chance to respond, you're not getting that message. Okay. Here's another key as a message recipient. Give feedback. Okay. When your turn, so to speak, comes, give that person feedback. Also be giving them feedback as they're delivering this message, right? It's what we call active listening. I know we've all heard of that before. That's the nodding, that's the that's getting that information back. That's the, well, if I heard you correctly, Sue, this is what you're telling me. So it's repeating back or summarizing what you've heard from the person. Okay. That's actively listening. That's giving them feedback. Also, don't hesitate to ask clarifying questions, even those that seem obvious sometimes, because that might force the person to repeat what they've shared again, just to be sure that everybody understands. And they may slightly change the wording so you get a little bit better clarification. And I said this before with active listening, but looks a little bit different towards the end of a conversation. What I'm talking about here is summarizing what you've heard. So that's when you're saying, okay, Jim, if I've heard you correctly, blah, 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 this is what we're going to do, da, 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 da. So you're summarizing the entire conversation at that point, not just bits and pieces of it. Okay, so that's you as message recipient. Okay, you owe that to the person delivering the message. Now, if you're a message deliverer person, right, you're looking to be effective, here's the thing you have to remember, and for a lot of people this is hard to swallow. If your messages aren't achieving their desired goal, and remember we talked about that was part of the who, what, when, and where, right? That's on you. If that other person doesn't understand what you've shared, or they don't follow through on what you asked them to do, or somewhere there's a gap, I'm telling you right now, if you delivered that message and there's a failure point, that's on you. Again, that's hard for a lot of people to swallow. I'm going to say it one more time. If your messages are not receiving your desired goal, that's on you. You need to go back to the who, what, when, and where in that delivery to figure out where the gap is. Okay. Here's what else you can do. Ask that person why. So let's go through a scenario real quick. This is you and Jane, and you're talking to Jane. Jane, I asked you last Thursday if you could make sure the shipping labels were printed out and ready for Monday morning shipment. They weren't there. I'm just wondering what happened. Again, I'm not accusatory. You could hear my tone. I'm just being curious at this point. Curiosity gets us a long way when we're looking for clarification or understanding. Nothing there as far as how I delivered that message sounded negative, right? Because remember that we're talking about the 90+% of that message, which is my tone and so on. When you ask that question, you know what you do? You shut up. You let them explain. Don't explain for them. People are funny. When you ask them a question, they like to have the opportunity to answer it. It's disrespectful not to let them answer it. Why do I say that? Because I've seen too many leaders ask a question and then answer the question they just asked. So don't do that. Remember this too, what your goal is in asking for this clarification, right? There's been a communication gap. You're looking to fill that gap. In this Jane situation, you're looking to figure out what you can do to improve on your delivery, your message. Because somewhere Jane didn't get it. We're giving Jane the benefit of the doubt here. We're saying she's intelligent. She wants to do a good job. She's got all those things going for her. We failed in our message delivery because Jane didn't do what we needed her to do. So we're going to find out why that happened. We're going to find it out so it doesn't happen again. Okay? Here's the last point I want to leave you with. And we put this up where I work, and it's important to me, and I encourage people to have this displayed. Excuse me. It's an acronym called THINK. So THINK. And sometimes when I talk about this, I have some fun with it. Maybe I will here. So the T stands for true, meaning when you say something, is it true? Okay. So that's the T. The H is it helpful? So helpful. H is helpful. Is it helpful? The I is inspiring. Is it inspiring? The N is for necessary. So is it necessary? For whatever it is you say, is it necessary to say it? And finally, the K is kind. So is it kind? We have some fun with this. People get a kick out of this when they say, hey, this person says Kyle is a jerk, and this is HR Kyle is a jerk, right? Well, the T is, well, is it true? Well, probably in some people's eyes it is, right? Is it helpful? No, it's not helpful. No one ever said, gosh, by hearing that, I'm going to be much more effective in the work I do. Okay. Is it inspiring? No, it's not inspiring me, because when someone says that, I don't say, yes, I'm ready to conquer the world. Is it necessary? No, it's not. If those words were never said, nothing changes in the world, so it's not necessary. Is it kind? No, it's not really that kind. Sorry, that's not a kind thing to say. So let's wrap this up today. Effective communication, that's what we talked about today. We started with the who, what, when, and where. We talked about how why related to that. We talked about being an effective communicator focused on a lot of things that aren't said, and really only 7% is the true words that we're sharing. Okay. We talked about how important it is to be an effective listener. And then we wrapped it up by saying if your messages aren't having the desired result, you as message deliverer are the problem. You've got to figure out how to reach your audience effectively. And then I left you with this acronym today, THINK, THINK. Do a Google search. You'll see some wonderful posters that maybe you want to print out and put up at your desk. Otherwise, we're going to wrap up segment 1 talking about effective communication. Okay. And that's our exploration of that. Okay. We've covered some valuable insights, but I want you to stay tuned for segment 2. That's where we're going to be joined by Kelly. Kelly's a long-serving employee with unique experiences to share. So don't go anywhere.
Are you a business owner looking to build a thriving team? Or perhaps a job seeker on a quest for your dream career? Look no further than HR Kyle. HR Kyle is your trusted partner for all things human resources. We're not just about services, we're about success. For businesses, HR Kyle offers tailored HR solutions from talent acquisition to compliance support. We're here to help your team flourish. And for the job seekers, HR Kyle provides personalized career guidance and direction that only a seasoned HR professional can offer. We'll help you find that perfect job match. Don't settle for less. Choose HR Kyle and unlock success today. Visit us at www.hrkyle.com. HR Kyle, unlocking potential, empowering careers, transforming business.
Welcome back to the HR Kyle podcast in segment 2. Now, I say this every episode. Today's no different. This is always my favorite segment. It's where we have a guest join us and talk about their career and share valuable insights for you, our listeners. Today, our guest is Kelly. Now, Kelly is an HR professional. Again, that's our first time, right? Generally it's just been HR Kyle here as your HR professional, but today we've got Kelly. Kelly's been doing this HR thing for a while. She's been about 30 years in the profession. I like to say that Kelly started as a teenager, so let's keep in mind she's still a young lady at this point, but she's seen a lot of changes throughout the years in HR. One, she's done a lot of different roles in human resources, worked with a lot of different people. And the biggest thing that Kelly brings to this discussion today, she's been at the same employer. Now hear this out. She's been at the same employer for 25 years. That is highly unusual, as we all know in this day and age. So at this point, let me welcome our guest today, Kelly. Kelly, welcome to the HR Kyle podcast.
Thank you, Kyle. I appreciate you inviting me to join your podcast today.
You're very welcome. I'm glad you're here. Kelly, why don't you start us off? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
First off, I'm a wife and a mother of 3 children, and also I have 1 grandchild. I started my career as a payroll clerk, and I'm the manager of HR in my current role.
Fantastic. So not only have you been in HR for a long time, but you've really worked your way up the ladder.
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. Now, Kelly, as I kicked off this segment today, I really describe you as a rare breed in this day and age. You've stayed with the same employer for over 25 years. What's motivated you to make that kind of commitment?
My motivation is basically the commitment to the for an opportunity to be a contributor and to the success of the company. My personal growth and all types of learning opportunities is a strong factor in my commitment as well.
So to put it another way, you really take your commitment seriously.
I do.
And I have to believe that's led to your success. I mean, that type of commitment breeds trust in the people that you serve, does it not?
It does.
Yeah. Kelly, what would you say have been the benefits of staying with one employer that long?
The benefit, I believe, is staying with the company is learning the business inside and out, not just in the HR arena. You also have different phases of growth. You also see different phases of growth within the company.
No, very true. And I would imagine in your role, it allows you to serve the employer, as well as employees better because you understand their roles, you understand how the company evolved, and you understand too probably how everything relates within the organization. That's got to make you a much more stronger HR professional.
I believe it does. I believe that everything through my lens of 25 years, I think that it has an impact on how I serve the company as well as the employees.
I have no doubt. I have no doubt about that. So the one possible downside, and people will say this, well, hey, you've only got this one company's perspective. You don't have these other perspectives of other companies. What would you say to really counteract that, to say, no, that's not true. This is how I keep myself aware of other perspectives and ideas to bring to my workplace?
I think that um, I do actually have other lenses, which I mean I have other companies that I worked for. I think that I always tried to be an empathetic person, and I'm consistently looking at the current trends and any learning opportunities, as well as understanding what other companies in similar industries are doing.
So you find ways to stay current without actually having to go outside the company, probably through your research and things that you're reading, I would imagine.
Right, and just connecting with different companies that
Mm-hmm.
do similar, the same, or in the same industry that we are in.
Hmm. Another phrase that you put out there that we haven't talked about a lot yet in our HR Kyle podcast, and that is the concept of empathy and how important it is in leadership roles. Where does empathy come into play in your day-to-day work?
I think it comes into play is you have to kind of put yourself in other people's shoes. I think that you have to have understanding of what others are going through and not, from your lens. It's what other individuals are going through and understanding that.
Hmm. Very valid points. Those are the things we talk about a lot at HR Kyle, and that is just that idea to be an effective leader. We can never forget, as a leader, we're serving those that are part of our teams or are part of our focus groups or whatever it is. And in your case, it's part of your employee base that you serve. To be effective in leading them, you have to understand where they're coming from and the things that are important to them.
Yes, I believe that's true.
And it certainly worked well for you. Kelly, I want to wrap up today's segment with this question because we've got a lot of different listeners out there. And by the way, I want to put a plug in here, which I think is really cool. When I looked at the data over the past couple of weeks of our listeners, we have a listener from outside the continental U.S. It's someone, I'm not sure who it is, in Great Britain. So if you're listening today, I hope you are. Thank you for turning into the HR Kyle podcast. But where I was going with this last question is, we always hope, especially from our guest segments, to pass on something to our listeners that they can say, yes, okay, I can use that today, tomorrow, or the next day as I approach my work. So I'm going to ask you this question. What advice would you give to someone newer in their career about accomplishing the kind of longevity that you've enjoyed?
Certainly, I think that you don't be quick to give up on a company. Sometimes I say the grass is not always greener on the other side of the fence. Challenges build character, and this can be used in all areas of life. Be true to who you are, and if your values and beliefs between you and the company are not in alignment, you should consider other options. Just keep in mind that work-life balance is key.
Kelly, you made some really good points there in just a few sentences. And again, I hope our listeners out there, possibly even those that are a little younger in their career and are looking to make their mark, follow that advice that you've given. Again, not to be too quick to make a change. Look for alignment as far as principles and what you stand for in the company that you join. And like you said there at the end, appreciating that work-life balance is critical. Fantastic messages to our listeners. Again, Kelly, I want to thank you for joining us today as a guest. You've really provided some good, strong insight to our listeners. It's been great to hear your thoughts and ideas. And other than that, I just want to say thank you, Kelly. Thank you to our listeners. And guys, there you have it. The conclusion of
Thank
segment
you,
two.
Kyle.
Oh, you're very welcome, Kelly. So that's the conclusion of segment two featuring Kelly, the dedicated long service employee. We've heard some fascinating stories today and insights from Kelly. We've shed some light on the employee perspective. So again, I want to thank you, our listeners, for joining us on this journey. Stay tuned for more intriguing episodes on the HR Kyle podcast.
Well, that's a wrap for today's episode of the HR Kyle podcast. We hope you found our discussion valuable and filled with insights that you can apply in your professional journey. Whether you're a business leader aiming to foster a thriving workplace or a job seeker looking to carve out your own path, remember that HR Kyle is the compass that can guide you towards success. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share it with your network. We're committed to being your trusted source for HR wisdom, and we look forward to having you back with us for our next episode. Remember, in the world of HR and professional growth, there's always room for progress. Be sure to visit our website at hrkyle.com. That's hrkyle.com to learn more about how we can help you meet your business and professional goals. So until next time, this is HR Kyle signing off. Stay motivated, stay informed, and keep reaching for those career goals. Music provided by bensound.com. That's bensound.com.